Flawless victory.
Hey guys, as I've said in other videos, 2019 wasn't a very memorable year in gaming. Nothing really blew my mind. I skipped on both Disco Elysium and Outer Wilds, which were apparently the best games of the year, so maybe that's why, but 2020 is going to be quite different. Not only do we have new consoles this year, which that alone makes this an important year, but we have crazy stuff like a new Half-Life game and a Final Fantasy VII remake. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. This year will definitely go down as one of the most important ones in gaming history. So here's my rundown of my most anticipated games for the year. I go through them chronologically, so any games without a proper release date will be last, but here's a handy little guide if there's any specific month that you want to check out. Okay, quick edit. As I was making this video, two games that I listed were delayed: Final Fantasy VII and Marvel's Avengers. So instead of redoing everything and doing all the sections again, I would just keep the order that I had previously, but show those delays in text. As always, please remember to leave your comment, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and with that said, let's just get right to it. Okay, January is pretty much dead to me. There's Dragon Ball Z Kakarot coming out, which, I don't know, it might be good, but the combat seems to be more like Xenoverse and not so much like Budokai Tenkaichi, which I really liked. I played a whole lot of Budokai 2 and 3, so I don't know, it looks interesting. I might get it. It's coming out in like 3 days, but I'm really not convinced so far. Okay, next month has a very strangely interesting release. There's Bayonetta and Vanquish Collection coming to PS4 and Xbox One. I don't really care that much about Bayonetta, but I remember really liking Vanquish when I played it on PS3 quite a few years back. I never finished it, and it's a very unique action game with this sliding mechanic that I don't really remember the details of, but I am interested in playing it again. And that's pretty much everything that's interesting in February for me. Next up is March, and here's the Final Fantasy VII remake. I remember the day I bought this and played it with my brother for the first time. I was like 12 or 13 years old. We played the entire afternoon, and instead of going to sleep, we just stayed up and played this for like 12 hours straight. This was such a massive game. 3 CDs, incredible CGI scenes, which if you look at them now, you wonder what the hell it was that you found so amazing back then, but I swear, when Final Fantasy VII came out, it blew my mind. For years, fans have been asking for some sort of HD remake, but what we're getting, well, it's more than that, but it's also quite different. We're just getting a straight up new game with completely different combat and game mechanics, so this might turn out to be really awesome, or a really terrible idea and a needless adaptation. This is coming out March 3rd, and we're not even getting the full game, but rather a tiny little slice of the first part of it. It's not really clear when the other sections will be released and how many we are to expect. I don't know, this might be really good or a complete and utter disappointment. Also coming out in March is Doom Eternal. Doom 2016 was one of the best games of that year, and Doom Eternal is by all accounts as amazing as the first game, but there are some elements that I'm not too sure about. First of all, the multiplayer in the first one was kind of an afterthought, and it seems like they're investing a lot more time into it this time around. Personally, I couldn't care less, since that's not the kind of multiplayer game I'm into, and as far as the campaign goes, there are a lot of new movement options like grappling and climbing, which might turn out to be really great, or they might interfere with the pace of the action, but then again, only time will tell. This was supposed to release back in 2019, but it got delayed, which is a good thing if that means we're not gonna get a half-finished product when this finally releases. I just hope they don't spend too much time focusing on the multiplayer part, which I am not interested in. March is also the month that we get a new Half-Life game. It's a VR game, which makes sense for Valve, but I don't have a VR set yet, so I'm just interested to see how this game is received and if it marks any sort of meaningful step forward for VR games. I do want to buy a VR helmet, but there's a couple of things stopping me right now, mainly the cost and practicality. I live in a very seismic country, so isolating myself completely in a VR world sounds extremely dangerous, especially if I have cables hooked up all around me. So until there's some good AR helmet with good inside-out tracking, I don't think I'll be making the jump just yet. Next up, we have April, which is Cyberpunk 2077 month. I'm playing The Witcher 3 again, and if there's one thing that stands out to me, it's the writing and the graphics. If Cyberpunk has the same amount of detail and care put into its quest design and world building, I think it could make for one of the most interesting first-person games ever released. There's a lot of hype around this game for a reason, but I am worried about a couple of things. First, this will release at the end of the PS4 and Xbox One cycle, and it looks to be pushing for extremely incredible graphics. The Witcher 3 didn't really run well on either console, so performance is definitely something that worries me, though I will be playing this on PC. The other thing is the first-person perspective. This will be CD Projekt Red's first FPS game, so I hope they get the movement and the gunplay right. Both are extremely important for an FPS game to feel good, especially one that will be probably around 50 to 100 hours long. Cyberpunk has been in development for 6 years, and given the success that they had with Witcher 3, they wouldn't be just putting this out there if it wasn't ready. This is going to be no doubt one of the biggest releases of 2020, and I really can't wait to play it. Unless Gears Tactics or Predator Hunting Grounds turn out to be awesome, which I don't know, I'm not too sure about, that's pretty much it for April. May has 2 games that I'm interested in. One is of course The Last of Us Part 2. I loved the first game. It is one of the best narrative experiences ever in a video game. The story and the characters were amazing. The acting is spectacular and the gameplay was really good, since it's straight from just being a cover shooter into something much more organic. The way enemies react, the way close combat works, and the different ways you have of dealing with each situation makes The Last of Us an extremely tense and sometimes even unsettling game to play. There's no doubt in my mind that the sequel will be just as polished and well performed, but I am wondering a lot about the story. The first game was such a close experience that it took me a real effort to dive into the DLC they made, which was good, but it wasn't something that the game needed in my opinion, just like it didn't need a sequel. They've said they would only do a sequel unless they really had a good story to tell, so I guess we'll see if that turns out to be true. The other game that's coming out in May is a weird one. Marvel's Avengers seems like something I would really enjoy, since I really like the Marvel Universe and the movies, but what they've shown so far is just strange. Graphically, it looks good, but the character design is just way off in my opinion, and it has nothing to do with being used to the actors from the movies. The characters in the game just look like cheap B-movie actors. Captain America looks like he's wearing some homemade armor suit with shoulder pads that he bought at some store. And Black Widow, who is supposed to be this like femme fatale, looks like a soccer mom. Thor's armor looks like it's a couple of sizes too big for him. I really can't like pinpoint exactly what it is, but it feels like the proportions are all wrong. The upper bodies are way too big, the heads are too small, there's like some uncanny valley thing going on. They all look like some LARPers and not the actual Avengers. And again, this has nothing to do with the movies. Peter Parker looks nothing like Tom Holland in the Spider-Man game, and that was completely fine. This is just not very good character design, and it's very strange to see that in a game that should be a huge deal. The gameplay that they showed looks okay, nothing spectacular, and they are pushing for some sort of online multiplayer thing, so I don't know, this might be 2020's Anthem. And that's pretty much it in terms of games with actual release dates. There's a couple of games I also want to mention that are supposed to come out this year but don't have an actual release date yet. The first one is Ghost of Tsushima. We really haven't seen much of this game. There's more CG trailer than gameplay footage at this point, but that kind of makes sense for Sony. They are focused on The Last of Us right now, and they were focusing on Death Stranding before that. So it's probably smart not to show too much of Ghost just yet. What we have seen so far looks amazing. Sucker Punch did a great job with Infamous Second Son back in 2014. So I'm really looking forward for their take on an open world samurai action game. Now, the weirdest thing about this game is that it's supposed to come out in summer 2020, so it's gonna be real close to the release date of the PS5 at that point. It's going to be interesting to see if that will affect sales in any way. I don't know, personally I would much rather wait and play both this and The Last of Us Part 2 on new hardware because they will obviously play better, but since I do want to cover these games during release, that won't be the case. We'll just have to wait and see. The other games that I'm really looking forward to are Crosscode and of course Riftbreaker. Crosscode is getting its console release this year, and I just can't wait to have that game on my Switch. I just keep telling everyone that game belongs on the Switch. And you might know this already, but I've been playing the alpha preview of Riftbreaker, and I really like what I've seen so far. The combination of RTS base building elements with the hero-like mech gameplay, the interactive foliage, the weapon upgrades, everything is really, really cool. There are very few details about the campaign so far, but I think it will be a really fun, interesting, and different game to look out for in this year. Okay, so that's everything, but I bet there's a lot more unannounced games or games that flew under my radar that might surprise this year. And as I said earlier, not only do we have a lot of interesting games to look forward, but also details on new console hardware and new announcements. I bet that we get our first look at Horizon Zero Dawn's sequel this year, and that alone has me tremendously excited. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so if you like the video. I'm going to try and do my best to put out great content for you guys this year. I started the channel late in 2018, and at first I made my videos in Spanish, but I feel like momentum has really picked up since I switched to English. Feedback has been great, so I plan to step it up this year in terms of both video quality and the amount of games that I cover. So that will be all for now. Thanks for watching again, and I'll catch you in the next one.